First of all, being working in the Southeast Asian region for energy policy since the last 15, 20 years, I would say congratulate the colleagues here in the Philippines to have this kind of roundtable. It is not common in the region, and I think it's a very good point to have a debate about the right way to go forward in energy policy and energy planning. So therefore, we appreciate this broader discourse because it can be a very good start for leading to a common understanding what needs to be done. Why is this so important? Because as people have listened to my talks here in the Philippines in the last 6 or 7 years, they have noticed that sometimes I try to raise some points which are not gritty-nitty debating on the paper. It's the broad perspective. Where are we heading? And I would like to make the same point today and commenting it to the paper, because the paper goes very much the traditional way of analyzing things like we have done it in the past. And I believe we need extra work because the framework conditions have changed, which was not the case 10 years ago. And I will try to explain why. We are at a crossroad, and it's not only the Philippines, it's every country. Because decisions on the power plant, as we know, have very severe long-term impact. You decide now, you build it in 5 years, and it will operate 40 years. Everybody may think back about 45 years back, what did we know about the energy situation? So it's a very complex long-term decision process. Unfortunately, many energy planners and energy experts still using outdated data. 5 years ago, this was not so important. Nowadays, it can be very important because in the last 18 months, tremendous development have happened, which will imply consequences. And therefore, the energy planning complex, how we did it in the past, and actually it happened that I made my PhD about energy planning some 1988, and I have done it exactly the way it was done here. But now we have to complement that, and this is what it's all about. And because, why is this? Because there are framework conditions that have changed. Just a few words. Sector coupling means transport and power sector will merge, something we have not factored in when we did power planning before. Disruptive technology developments. All developments we had in the power sector in the last 100 years were not disruptive. They came over 30 years development. I mean, the biomass first, then the coal, then the oil, the gas, the nuclear, they all came up over 30 years and the paradigm change, and then after 50, 60 years they had their thing. Now we have these disruptive technologies which follow the S-curve, and they follow much more this development of laptops and mobiles in a much quicker sense. And this has severe consequences. And of course, climate change, that's another one. So the problem we have right now is nobody of us here in the room, not even the professor from Germany, does know how the energy future will look like exactly. But it will be very different from today because of these disruptive technologies. So, and therefore, planning has to be incremental, has to be very flexible, and long-term decisions need to be much more looked at than we did it in the old times of using WASPs or any other power planning where we said every 3 years, 300 megawatt, 100 megawatt, or 200 megawatt. That was easy. We were just debating coal or oil or gas or nuclear, but we didn't have to change the principal questions. So this is actually a picture of Siemens, how they think a future energy system looks like. I can't tell you how it looked like, but it will not look like today. So, what are the key messages we have to factor in our consideration of energy planning? Well, it sounds bold, but we are at the beginning of the third energy revolution. The first one was coal, which made England big, the steam power. The second one was oil, which made Rockefeller and the Arabs rich. And the third energy revolution is this photovoltaic, whether we like it or not. And this is the first thing which can make nearly everybody, every country rich, because everybody can make these modules and you become more independent. And this is quite a severe influence, which it will happen not in 40 years, but in a very shorter time. It goes in hand that, or actually nowadays, renewables at certain spots are the cheapest sources of power generation. I will show some results of auctions. Second thing is, the past, and I was grown up for a coal power plant engineering in a classical institute to plan coal power plants. There we had a few generators and the people just pay for the consumption. This will change. Consumer will become prosumer. So we will get a smart grid. We get a complete reversal of the current energy market. And this will not happen in 40 years. It happens much quicker. That means existing utility business will have to cope to recover grid charges. Look to the telephone companies who are relying on consumption of telephone. It doesn't work anymore. Now you have the Smart or Globe or whatever, which have complete different services. Something like this will happen in the energy business. Power markets will have to adapt and transport will merge. And that means the batteries and the PV together with electric vehicles will revolutionize the current situation. And the question is, do we cope for this? Are we prepared for this? And do we the right things in anticipating this in our energy planning? So that's the key question. Just a few slides. These are levelized cost of utility scale power in OECD. And you see right now, many are already in the broad band of fossil fuel. And this is current costs, 2016. So that means the discussion, one power is more expensive than the other, is not so valid anymore. Even in this paper here, the difference is very marginal when we talk from 2016 to 2040. We are talking 2% difference in the power prices. And another nice picture, it's the Fifth Avenue, Easter 1900, no cars, 10 years later, no horses. Technology development happens quite quickly. And remember, we have to factor that in. So now some comments. Why we think the paper tries to stimulate the discussion, which is very good, but in the current form, we believe it is not enough to cope for these things what I have outlined earlier. It is much more complex, the energy planning. And this linear planning we did in the past does not cope for these problems. So this is why we think it should in that form not be used as a base for decision making. It needs to be more complex, the debate. And it has some flaws and problems, but my colleague before has already mentioned it, and I will not go in detail of that one, just a few points later. And the recommendation made by the paper are based on some cases. We have seen now in the recent paper there have been done more cases, which is very good, but most likely we need much more of these scenarios and need to weight them and need to risk them to come to a proper decision base. Then we have some points which we like to comment on, especially the assumption on cost development of renewables, on environmental charges, and the so-called grid integration cost, which is nowadays, after the renewables are not anymore too expensive, now a lot of people say, yeah, they are cheap, but to integrate it in the grid, that is so expensive. I will show you soon that this is not the case. So the general comment are that we feel that the renewables, the role of renewables, because it is happening, and it's happening quite extensively, is not factored in enough. It is just incremental, and this is not the development. It will be S-curve. And on the other hand, which is the good result, even within that thinking of that box, when we assume a moderate decrease of 3% per year, and now in the new case even 8%, then going renewable seems to be quite reasonable, because it is then already, even under that assumption, the cheapest one. So, And therefore, we like this temporary utilization of less costly revenues. I like in the light of power plants, coal power plants, operated for 40 years. The word temporary is maybe not. I mean, it reminds me about 1997 when I came first here. We had these power barges coming to Manila because of brownouts. The power barges, I consider temporarily. But a coal power plant is not temporarily. Anyway, so now that's another slide. People don't realize that the flipping point about investment in renewables and conventional was already in 2012. It's not happening now. Already 4 years ago, more investment goes in renewable than in conventional. You can ask why. Climate costs, externalities are not the reason. It's other reasons. Let's talk about cost, because you are economists. I know life cycle cost is not the perfect comparison, but it is established by IE and anybody. It's more or less the only way to compare different apple and peaches. And I will come later even that to make apples and peaches on an even term. And you see, this is the case now of Germany, not only OECD in general. For German, it doesn't matter. Wind, solar, hard coal, gas, it's all between 6 to 10 cents. These ones are the external costs, which we not have factored in like CO2 cost or so. It's just the cost which you have even without paying any fund. Nuclear, sorry, the British, I'm very grateful about this, that they build it, because now we know what it cost. With 12 cents, it's out of discussion. And I think we don't have to talk too much about nuclear, because no bank will finance it. Anyway, so, and when you do CCS, it will be well. So, what I want to show is the costs in Germany doesn't matter anymore. And when you do, and actually we are just undertaking it to supporting DOE and making the cost study exactly for the Philippines, I'm pretty sure that the same picture will look like in the Philippines. So some specific comments. You have taken the base, the constant prices for 2015. It's okay to take it as a base, but it is most likely not a very realistic scenario, because it doesn't happen that for the next 25 years the costs are constant. And the fuel prices and developments, yes, they are very complicated, but to take it as a constant base is just as a reference, okay, but as one of the cases, most likely not. Well, I just have put something about coal prices, predictability of coal prices. I just put in 2 snaps of the last 6 years. This was happening in the last few months. This is what here. Coal is by far not a predictable price, especially when you not have it all in your own minds. Because coal follows oil and gas with some 6 months delay. It is international. When the oil price was high, coal got more expensive. Not that their power plants are shaving, it is just economics. So therefore, when we look to the oil price is the only leading price changes. And when oil is changing, gas is changing, and coal is changing. And who of us in the room believes that for the next 25 years, oil will be smooth and easy? It hasn't been in the past. So I think it is very difficult to assume constant prices or even these moderate prices. The World Bank has told me when I worked in 91, 92, I had to do all the economic calculation for power plants based on $22 to $27 a barrel. I was told when it is more expensive, the people will drill, and oil will be never more expensive than $27. This was the statement by World Bank 92 when we designed diesel power plants. Everybody knows what happened. So it's very difficult to make clear assumptions. So, sensitivity analysis. Actually, that's not the latest presentation. You have added now 8% a decrease over the time, which is already a very good addition to the changes. To take the feed-in, which will most likely, according to the undersecretaries and to the discussion in DOE, not be continued in that form for the solar and the wind. So the auctioning will come in, which makes a lot of sense when you have a mature market. Therefore, the decreases of these feed-in was there at the beginning to jumpstart the market and develop a private sector. That was the purpose of the feed-in the Philippines, where I was a little bit responsible in 2010 to set the tariffs. So therefore, I would say the projection should not be focused on the FIT rates. The FIT rates were just temporary in the beginning, and most likely the auction prices you will have in there. About future costs. The German Institute Fraunhofer, which is quite known in the solar thing, has made last year a cost projection for the next 40 years. They projected for 25, 3 cents a kilowatt hour. And for 2050, less than 2 cents. Everybody knows already last year we had the auction prices here in Chile and Mexico at below 2 cents. That means the German predicted solar for 2025, which was already assumed by 2016. You can be very easily wrong with the cost estimations because this technology is disruptive and it doesn't follow this incremental thing. These are the results of auction prices, and you see even in Germany now we have around 6 cents, despite the fact that we have no sunshine. And Chile and other countries are well below. When the Philippines will go to auctions and you do your homework and cut the red tape, you will get as well very low costs. So now comes the other very critical point, while the cost figure doesn't argue anymore. Now comes the other point, grid integration. The paper had some cost figures from the UK. Actually, it was cited from 2008. It is now nearly 10 years later, and even the UK have now got some more experience than this paper from 2008. Well, let's take the German example again. Oh, sorry. These are the costs of integration. This is the generation cost of electricity, 6 cents. Then come 1 cent for grid cost, half a cent for balancing. So the total integration cost in Germany, and we are talking 40 gigawatt solar, 40 gigawatt wind. So we are not talking peanuts. We're talking really substantial. The German load is 80 gigawatt. And Sunday afternoon, 100% comes from solar and wind because we have 40 gigawatt solar, 40 gigawatt wind. So integration is really an important point. And these are the cost figures. So in average, you can say 1 euro cents is the average integration cost for variable renewables. Because the classical thinking, 1 megawatt wind means 1 megawatt backup, this is something from 20 years ago. It is about flexibility, it's about forecasting, it's about price signals, it's about demand charges, and it's about flexible generation. This is how the Germans do it. We don't have 80 gigawatts standing aside we have for 80 gigawatt wind and solar, we have 5 gigawatt primary reserve. The rest is forecasting. Because when you can forecast, you can schedule. Like you do it as well. In the morning, you run your power plants up, and in the evening, after the soap operas are over, the people switch out the TV, the power plant go out again. This is scheduling. And the same thing you do when you can prognose the thing. So, therefore, the integration costs, in our opinion, is not anymore a big point. Yes, it needs to be done, and NGCP, Transasco needs to do their homework, and it needs time, and you can't do it from 0 to 100. But over 5 to 10 years, and the German utilities are as conservative as the Philippines. They are not different. They are very different, and they learned over the 10 years to get to this point. So, last point, calculation of social cost. My speaker has already mentioned it. That's a lot of debate, whether we should take it as 1.5 weighted or not, whether it's 25 or 100 or 200. Of course, there can be a debate. Our point is that the assumption has been taken in this paper are very, very conservative. You can take them with this, and nobody can prove you wrong with this, but most likely we feel, 2 minutes, it is not the main point of calculation. But get me right, I don't think that the carbon price matters in this discussion. The point is, energy security, predictability of energy prices, because every kilowatt hour you get from your solar and wind, you know exactly how much it will cost in 20 years. When you build a coal power plant, a gas power plant, an oil power plant, you do not know what will be your generation cost in 2 months, unless you have some price risk. Because 3 more coal power barges hitchhiked by Abu Sayyaf, and the coal price jumps up, and the prices go up. And we can't control that. Yeah? So therefore, renewable energy helps you to reduce the uncertainty of price prediction. And as I show you, the cost is not anymore the figure. The integration cost, you can do it. So therefore, in my opinion, sorry about the German climate change project, I don't think that the carbon one is the important discussion. It's the energy security and the price developments. The carbon prices is the ice on the topping, but doesn't make the equation different. So therefore, I don't want to argue too much on it. Last point is that, yes, the Philippines are very much severe affected by climate change, and therefore we think it's good to do something, but whether it is now this 0.5 actual social cost or an other kind of assumption is once again an economical debate, and I think we feel it's not very adequate, but of course it can be done. There's nothing done. Now, the key questions at the end, and this is our questions to the recommendations of the paper. And do the authors take the worldwide energy development adequately into this consideration? This disruptive technology, which happens much quicker than these 40 years. Are they using the right assumptions? What I just said about this disruptive technology S-curve development. And does the energy planning adequately, in the light of this upcoming paradigm changes in the energy sector, take this into consideration? And we think, therefore, this paper is a good start, but we need a much broader debate on the discourse, how to incorporate the uncertainties in the actual planning. This is our recommendation, because we believe the Philippines should not repeat the Chinese example. Guess what? Canceling 104 coal projects in construction. Last year, the Chinese stopped 104 coal projects, partly in construction. They canceled the EPC and said, time up for me. And I hope for the Philippines it's not time up, and the number of cancelled coal projects will not happen, because more careful planning happens in the Philippines than in China. Thank you very much.